32nd Guam Youth Congress is hereby called to order, and I'll call on Representative Al Labang for the prayer. Please stand.
In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, Amen. Heavenly Father, I ask you to guide us for today's session and to shed us with your wisdom, humility, and grace to make grateful decisions that would affect our island. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen.
Thank you, Representative Labang, and I'll call on Representative Dinsman for the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see?
Thank you, Representative Dinsman, and I'll call on Representative Quintanilla for the Guam hymn.
Vanogitsamor
Thank you, Representative Quintanilla, and I'll call on Representative Elijah Santos for the recitation of the Inifresi.
Inifresi. Tilum di raso. Mas takilum di corazon. Zanimas figu naninya sinyahu. Hu fresin maisazu. Harabai protegi. Zanhu defendi. I hinengi. I kotura. I lenguahi. I aibi. I hanum taritana gitsamoru. Iren shaku de retsugina zus tata. Este wa firma. I Biblia. Zani banderahu. I banderangwa.
Thank you, Representative Santos. Please be seated. Mr. Secretary, roll call, please.
Representative DeHelig, Representative De Gracia, Representative Dinsman, Representative Asian, Representative Fellison, Representative Flores, Representative Garrido, Representative LeBang, Representative Lorenzo, Representative Maige, Representative Matanani, Representative Munya-Brett, Representative Pareda, Representative Perez, Representative Kichichu, Representative Kineni, Representative Quintanilla, Representative Richards, Representative Sablan, Representative Elijah Santos, Representative Javan Santos, Representative Taga, Representative Tyron, Representative Trinidad, Representative Christian Valencia, Representative Isabel Valencia, Representative Vicente. Mr. Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're now on item 7 of our legislative session agenda. Mr. Floor Leader, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to approve legislative journal dated November 30, 2019.
Could you please say the date again?
November 30, 2019.
There's been a motion to approve our legislative journal dated November 30, 2019. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Floor Leader,
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive session agenda items 8 through 11.
there's been a motion to waive session agenda items 8 to 11. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Floor Leader,
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding House rule, I make a motion to open nominations for recording secretary.
notwithstanding the House rules, there's been a motion to open the nominations for recording secretary. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Floor is now open for nominations. Representative Lorenzo, you're recognized.
Sizos Maasi, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I would like to nominate Mr. Jermaine Alerta as recording secretary.
I was just informed that Mr. Alerta accepts. Do I hear a motion to close? Representative Lorenzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to close the nominations for recording secretary.
There's been a motion to close the nominations for recording secretary. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Now, all those in favor of Mr. Jermaine Alerta as our recording secretary, please raise your hand. So moved. Mr. Jermaine Alerta, please stand up and raise your right hand. Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I solemnly swear in the presence of Almighty God that I will well and faithfully support the Constitution of the United States, the laws of the United States applicable to Guam, and the laws of Guam, and that I will conscientiously and impartially discharge my duties as an attaché of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress. So help me God. Congratulations. Now on that happy note, Mr. LeBang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding House rules, I move to place Resolution 28-32 to today's session agenda.
There's been a motion, notwithstanding the House rules, to place resolution number 28-32 onto our session agenda. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that all bills and resolutions in today's session agenda be given their first reading.
There's been a motion that all bills and resolutions on our session agenda be deemed to have their first reading. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to excuse members not present today.
There's been a motion to excuse members not present today. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Mr. Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive session agenda items 14 and 15.
There's been a motion to waive session agenda items 14 and 15. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're now in motions. Are there any motions? Representative Dahili, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to place Bill 30-32 into the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 30-32 onto our second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Dahili, you're recognized.
Hafaday, Zam Minanasizuis, y Congresion Manhobanguahan, Zani Comunidad. The Climate Change Resiliency Commission's purpose is to develop a strategy to build resiliency against climate change, which focuses on 8 key principles: energy, water resources, ocean and land resources, infrastructure and community, developmental planning, food security, public health and safety, and carbon emissions. Climate change, also known as the climate crisis, is a multi-generational problem that needs intergenerational solutions. The Commission currently has 9 members from the government and University of Guam. However, it currently fails to include those who will inherit the earth, our youth and students. Across the globe and here at home, demonstrations have been led by students and youth who call upon those in charge to lead us. But when those in charge fail to do so, students and youth are left powerless. It is my dream for youth and students to have a greater voice and responsibility for decisions that will affect them sooner rather than later. And so I ask the body to believe in ourselves and the youth by supporting Bill 30-32. Andongkulo na si Diyos maasi, maraming salamat po, and kinisu.
Thank you, Representative Dahili. On the main motion, are there any member who wishes to speak? Is there any member? Representative Kineni, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to give my support to this bill. As a co-sponsor, I saw, the importance of what climate change can mean to this island, especially for the youth. So it's important that several of these youth organizations have a, say or a vote in what is to come in the future, especially in something as daunting as climate change. So this is adding 3 youth representatives to this council should definitely give a more more futuristic look to what the goals should look like rather than short-term efforts that most councils come up with. So I would like to thank Representative Dahilic for introducing this bill and for adding on 3 more youth spots to this council. I think that's something that could benefit the island and benefit the youth of Guam. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
I'd just like to express my support with this bill. Not only does it give representation to students in college who are like part of the youth, it also provides representation from the IBOGs, Island Board Governing Students. It's an opportunity for high school students to voice their opinion, and I'm in complete support of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Seeing as there are none, Representative Dahilic, you're invited to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank our colleagues for speaking in support of the bill, and I look forward to a great decision come the third reading file. And with that said, I move to place Bill 30-32 into the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 30-32 onto our third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Kennedy, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion for a 5-minute recess.
We are in recess. We're back in session. We're currently in motions. Any member who wishes to make motion? Representative Labang, you recognize.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion that Representative Tyron Blas be reflected on the roll call.
It's been a motion to have the first roll call reflect Representative Tyron. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Any other? Representative Flores, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Bill number 29-32 in the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place Bill number 29-32 onto our second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Flores.
Sizos Masi, Mr. Speaker. Manana Sizos Todu Hamzu, Bill 29-32, entitled the Fangualuan Hasta Escuela or Farm to School Pilot Program Act, seeks to increase our island's self-sustainability, grow our local farms, and promote the health of our island's youth by implementing locally grown farm or foods into school meals. I would describe this bill as common sense legislation, especially when you consider that locally grown foods are healthier, cheaper to transport, and more easily accessible than imported goods. Beyond that, providing a direct destination for farms to provide local produce will aid in further developing their agricultural capacity. Throughout the United States, farm-to-school initiatives are quickly taking off, with 41 states, along with Washington, D.C., and the U.S. Virgin Islands enacting similar legislation. The U.S. Department of Agriculture also has funding that Guam can avail of relative to farm-to-school implementation. I have reached out to DOE and plan on working closely with them to secure this additional funding to support this bill's intent. Statutes similar to this do exist in Guam law, specifically the procurement of local produce law found in Title V of GCA. However, due to the fact that DOE maintains a contract with a food service provider, Sodexo currently, the current law does not apply to this contract. Bill 29-32 seeks to remedy this problem by making it a contractual requirement that the respective contractor provide a certain amount of locally produced goods to our island's public schools. I'd like to extend an Ndunklu Nesizos Maasi to the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs for their expeditious review of this bill and for allowing me to be present in their discussion. A further extension of my gratitude is given to my colleagues who co-sponsored and helped me draft this bill, as well as Director Munya Brett of the Department of Agriculture. I look forward to our discussion of this bill. Sizos Maasi.
Thank you, Representative Flores. On the main motion, on Bill number 29-32, are there any member who wishes to speak? Representative Santos, you're recognized.
I had a question for the primary sponsor, if he would yield.
Do you yield, Representative Flores? You may continue.
So in working on this legislation for farm to school, you know, as you acknowledged in your opening statements, there is a procurement law already on the books about this issue, and in regarding the contract with, well, not necessarily regarding the contract, but in pursuing new contracts with new food suppliers, local food suppliers to supply the food, you know, just like our fishing industry, many of our local agriculture producers are also sustenance-based producers. And, you know, whatever excess they have tends to be small enough to bring to the farmers markets, but not necessarily large enough to supply an entire school population. So I had this question for the primary sponsor, Mr. Speaker, which would be, how does this bill intend to create a larger industrial farming industry, or does it intend to take advantage of the smaller sustenance farmers that we currently have? Like, is the intention to grow an industrial farm industry, or to expand many smaller sustenance farming industries? Yes, the intent is to procure more local foods, but I'm just asking in what manner are we encouraging the development of the agriculture industry on the Guam? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Flores.
I would say it's a combination of both, growing it, what little extra they do have in terms of them actually providing a space to give these foods to, rather than having to go out and sell it to the general public. So DOE organizing a contract with the farms so that they have a source to send it to every week, every month, or what. And then, of course, in the long term, this is a pilot program, so in the long term, it would extend to hopefully a larger, more industrial agricultural industry. Sizos Masi.
Representative Santos, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to continue testimony. Or I'd like to continue my...
Yes.
Uh,
Thank you, Representative Flores.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to the primary sponsor for answering my question. I would just like to express my support for the legislation. Just wanted to clarify what type of industry we're trying to assist with this bill, because as we discuss farm to table, farm to school, it's important to acknowledge the environmental realities of being sustainable in expanding agriculture. Larger scaled industrial agriculture, especially on an island like Guam, could negatively impact the soil quality. So that's why I wanted to point out expanding a large industrial farm industry may be to the detriment of our local environment. But I see that having a balance of sustenance farmers being able to supply versus larger scale farmer projects would be ideal. And recognizing that this is a pilot program, I think part of the pilot program is to figure out where that balance is. So I think that finding the schools that would be most beneficial to starting this pilot program and figuring out which local farmers would be able to supply certain foods, and not only that, whether the food providers, whether the people who are working in the cafeteria can work with certain foods, because many of these many of the people who are working in our cafeterias are not only trained to cook certain type of foods, but also trained to uphold certain federal standards when it comes to cooking. But yeah, I think that a pilot program in this nature would be beneficial to our local farmers and beneficial to the schools. And I ask my colleagues to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Santos. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Kennedy, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question for the I have a question for the primary sponsor of the bill, if you'll yield.
Do you yield, Representative Flores? You may continue.
I just wanted to touch on something more that former Speaker Santos was talking about. Do we have the capacity to implement this even on a pilot program basis?
Sizos Masi for your question. So in creating this bill, drafting this bill, I did reach out to Director Munir Brett, and like I said, she is supportive of it, especially she was actually the one who shared with me the local procurement law, so showing that there is something in Guam law that applies to this. So it is its purpose is something that has been done before, maybe not DOE specifically, but it has been sought out by the legislature in the past, the government in the past. So she is supportive of it. She did say that, that the provision to place the Department of Agriculture as a kind of a consultation agency in terms of identifying that required amount is beneficial, because it doesn't set a hard limit for agriculture or for local produce, so that in the event that cannot be met by local farms, the students do have produce available to them. And of course, it's not going to put a strain on our local farms if they coordinate with the Department of Agriculture as well as Imagahaga to identify that correct amount and support the capacity we do have and possibly grow it.
I have one more question, Madam Speaker, if the primary sponsor would yield.
Representative
Yes.
Flores? Thank
Yeah.
you. You may continue.
Do you have the details of this is something we were discussing in the committee, but do you have the details of the Sodexo contract that if we are to introduce this now, we would be altering any parts of their agreement with GDOE?
So I'd like to clarify that the current Sodexo contract does expire this year, So this law, if passed, would not have any effect on the current contract. However, future contracts, it would have to be negotiated with Sodexo and DOE. So in terms of actual specifics that may conflict, I'm not too familiar as I'm unable to get that Sodexo contract from DOE, but I'm sure that it is able to work without too many conflicts. Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Flores. Representative Kennedy, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Back to the main motion. Is there anyone else that would like to?
I would like to reserve the rest for my testimony.
Sorry. Please proceed, Representative Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bill 29-32, when we were reviewing this in committee, the Education and Youth Affairs Committee, there were several smaller concerns that were brought up while we were discussing this bill. None, of course, were the intent of it, which is to bring, farm fresh produce from locally acquired sources to our schools, but rather the implementation and the wording of the law currently, the wording of the bill as it is currently written. One of the concerns I have, if you guys look at Section 54-104 on page 4 of the bill. Section 54-104 is the waiver in case of the waiver of requirements in case of emergency. This is something that the committee did spend a big deal discussing how we felt about waiver requests, especially given by the legislature and given by Imagahagan Guahan. And one of my concerns was that this was the shortage of, what was it, in case of, this was supposed to be in case of natural disasters, man-made disasters, or diseased crops. And it says here, Imagahaga shall have the authority to waive the required amount of local produce of this act for up to 90 days and may only exceed 90 calendar days with the approval of legislature on Guahan. And then it says Imagahaga is prohibited from authorizing such a waiver within 90 days of the expiration of a past waiver. So to me, I saw a little bit of a redundancy, but when it came to the waiver request, I thought that the 5 days there in subsection 1 was a little bit too fast after this 90 days has passed, and to give the legislature 5 business days in order to issue a waiver, I thought was unfair to the co-equal branch of government. So again, I'm bringing this concern, I brought this concern to the committee, and now I bring this concern to the floor because this is something that still has not changed in my mind, and I would like to at least hear the opinion of other members here on the floor. But as for changing it, we had one suggestion, which was to change it to 15 business days of the receipt, and the other was to change the 90 calendar days to 70 calendar days in order to give the legislature a buffer period of 20 business days to deal with this in case of emergency. But like I said in the committee also, I do not want to spend a lot of time talking about in case of emergency because that's what exactly it's supposed to be. But at the same time, we want to make sure that language is cleared up before we introduce something like this and something does happen future along the lines. We want to make sure everything is clear. So as for Bill 29-32, I support it completely, but there are still few tweaks here and there that I feel need to be changed still, but I still give my overall arching support to this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I was reviewing the committee report and I just have some question to the prime sponsor, if he would yield.
Do you yield, Representative Flores? You may continue.
Mr. Speaker, on the committee report attached is an input by the Department of Agriculture, and the prime sponsor gave some question that the director answered. One question in particular asked was, has the department pursued or identified any potential federal funding relating to the Farm to School initiative? And the director answered that DOE has a Farm to School funding provided by USDA and has have been a partner with them since they received the funding last school year. I just want to ask the prime sponsor if when would the grant expire, or is there any time limitation for the grant?
Representative Flores?
In terms of that specific USDA grant, is that the farm to school, is that what you're referring to, Mr. Leader? Just to clarify.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, so I do know that DOE has obtained some of that funding from that grant. I'm not sure to what extent. This is just through me talking with someone from Senator Lee's office who contacted DOE when I was unable to contact DOE. So I'm not sure on when that grant funding expires. I would hope that it doesn't expire anytime soon, considering that we are fairly early into the fiscal year. So, and if DOE has already secured some funding, I'm sure that additional funding can be secured with relative ease.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yes. If I may continue.
Yes, you may continue. Thank you, Representative Flores.
Okay, so, Mr. Speaker, since we don't know when is the expiration of the grant, I think we should move forward with this bill, especially we're talking of federal funds that we might lose in the future. But as for concern as well with the email that was sent, it says that DOE and Department of Agriculture has been working on an initiative called Farm to Cafeteria Project. So it's a project started I think this year, and their pilot school that they the pilot school was the Okudu High School, and within the Okudu High School they developed a salad bar for students that allows farmers capabilities as well as students. And with Bill 29-32 is concerned, I give my full support for this bill. This bill would benefit the students under the Guam Department of Education. First, it will be able to teach our students about the process of planting and harvesting. It teaches students the process of germination, which shows how seed grows to a plant and bear some fruits and vegetables. Secondly, it will be an avenue for our island to be sustainable and be less dependent with import goods if we can copy this initiative outside of the schools. With this bill, it will make our students healthy and have a good nutrition. By creating this pilot program, according to this bill right in front of us, it would allow us to see if this program works or not works, because this initiative will only be implemented in certain schools where we can compare results, and it will allow for research. I hope that moving forward after 2 years, the program will be implemented in all schools. Furthermore, according to the email between the sponsor and the Director of Agriculture, that they are currently working under the Guam Economic Development Authority, the Farmers Co-op, and with the Farm to Table on Guam on the Farm to Cafeteria project. Mr. Speaker, I hope that this movement for food security does not only stay within our school, but also progress within the community. We as a community should start thinking of ways to be sustainable as climate change affects us. I would like to thank the prime sponsor to allowing me to be co-sponsor of this bill, and I hope that the rest of my colleagues support this bill. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative DeHelig, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 95% of Guam's food is imported, and Bill 29-32 serves to improve sustainability efforts by supporting our local farmers and feeding our youth locally and sustainably. I look forward for the pilot program to incorporate an aquaponic system to grow our food in a compact and sustainable manner, rather than land-dependent agriculture. Because Bill 29-32 is a pilot program, concerns could be identified and worked through to improve the program for max efficiency. I support Bill 29-32, and I urge the body to vote in favor of sustainability and environmentalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dehilig. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Trinidad, you're recognized.
I would like to express my support for this bill because as a public school student myself, I see it being beneficial to the schools and farmers on island. And not only that, but the appreciation students such as myself would have for the fresh goods that would be provided by the farmers. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Trinidad. Representative Tyron, on the main motion.
Cesar Masi, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to also share the same sentiment with my colleagues. I'd like to express my support for this bill that was introduced. I think that it's important that the Guam Department of Education schools have an opportunity to learn, as my colleague mentioned, about the process of germination, but also to learn about sustainability and healthy nutrition, and to make that a focal point in their lives as students. It's important that we realize that our lives as people who live on an island can be lived sustainably, they can be healthy, and that we can live and cultivate on our land. And with that being said, I'd like to make a motion to add my name as a co-sponsor to this bill.
On the motion to have Representative Tyron be added as co-sponsor of this bill, first I'd like to ask the prime sponsor if that's okay.
Again.
Of course. All right. On that motion, all those in favor say aye. Or, sorry, are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. Representative Tyron, you may continue.
Cesar Masi, and I'd just like to urge each and every one of my colleagues to please be in support of this pilot program, because it is something new for GDOE students that would benefit them greatly. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative De Gracia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, everybody. So I just wanted to express my support for this bill. I mean, I had the opportunity to actually sit in with the committee and actually hear the discussions about this bill. And I just want to say, good job to everybody, especially to the primary sponsor and all the co-sponsors of this bill, because I really think that this bill is something special, and it really shows like our investment into the youth. And not only our investment to the youth, but just, in Guam in general, that the investment that we're putting towards the future generations. Some of the key points of this bill that I actually like and that I wanted to highlight for everybody was the first point of having it being a pilot program. For me, having it being a pilot program is kind of like a trial and error phase. And we actually get to see, how well is this going to actually work out for everybody, and how is this going to affect the youth and all the schools that are going to be participating once this bill takes place. And I know that we can actually anticipate things where we can make these changes and anticipate in order for this bill to become successful. But having it as a pilot program kind of mitigates that anticipation, so that it goes through a trial and error phase, and just to see, if this bill is going to work out for the youth and for all the schools that are going to be involved. Secondly, what I'd like to highlight is having GDOE detailing the effectiveness of this bill. Now, having it documented and being able to see what other people have to say about it and how it's affecting others is very important. And that's how we can be able to, adapt and change and fix whatever we need to do and, make that investment towards the future. Hopefully, I would like to see this bill to open up new opportunities for the local government, for the youth, and for everybody that, supports this bill. And that pretty much is my testimony, and I'd like to thank you for putting this bill together, to the primary sponsor and co-sponsors, and you definitely have my support for this bill. Jesus Masi.
Thank you, Representative DeGuasha. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Kitchachu, you're recognized.
I'd like to also give my support for this bill because it not only helps the students learn about sustainability, but also to help all the farmers on Guam who this is their living and this is what they love to do, and it also gives back to them as far as supporting their produce. And I also hope that this bill helps implement the children to also have a curriculum-based farming at school, like actually having their own garden and to grow local produce. And I'd like to give the rest of my time to Nolan. Is that okay? Can I do that?
Yes. Representative Flores, you're recognized.
Jesus Masi, Representative Kitsitsu. I'd like to motion to amend. Can I do that now?
Okay.
Oh, okay. Dispense, okay. To amend,
You may continue.
to amend page 4, line 22. If everyone can reference that. To strike 5 and then 5 and add 14 in parentheses.
Would you like to speak on the amendment, Representative Flores?
This is just to satisfy the request of Representative Kaneni from the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs in terms of his concerns regarding the waiver time requirements.
Okay. On the amendment, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Dahilid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I motioned for recess.
We're in recess. back in session. Representative Dahilig, we left off with you. On the amendment, on the 14 business days amendment by Representative Flores. Do you want to speak on the amendment? Okay. Any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Kennedy on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the amendment because it does fix one of the major concerns I did have for this bill. 14 business days, it gives a little bit of a longer period for, legislative review of what is, to see if we need a longer period of waiver for this bill or for this potential law. So I appreciate Representative Flores introducing this amendment, and I'm in wholehearted support of this amendment and in wholehearted support of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Any other member who should speak on the amendment? Seeing there are none, are there any objections? Seeing again that there are none, amendment passes. Back on the main motion. Representative Flores, would you like to continue? Do you have any further amendments?
Oh, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'd like to motion to amend page 4, line 5. Everyone can take a look at that. There is a typo where it says the Department of Agriculture and the College of Natural and APLLIED dispensa. So I would like to motion to amend page 4, line 5 to strike APLLIED, I don't know what that word is, to read APPLIED, what we know as applied.
I'm guessing nobody wants to speak on this amendment. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. On the main motion, any other member who should speak on the bill? Representative Valencia, you're recognized.
I'd just like to express my support for this bill. As a regular cafeteria food consumer, I am extremely grateful for this bill, even though I might not experience this, I will not experience this program. I'm glad that the future high school students, high school public students will experience this. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Valencia. Any other member who should speak on the bill? Seeing as there are none, Representative Flores, you're invited to close.
Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to extend a further thank you to the entire body, all our representatives, for your support of this bill, as well as for this very helpful discussion so that we can fulfill its purpose in providing locally grown foods to our island school children and promote their health, grow our local farms and our industries.
Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I motion to place Bill 29-32 in the third reading file.
There's been a motion to place bill number 29-32 onto our third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're still in motions. Representative Labang, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I make a motion to reflect Representative Garrido in the first roll call.
There's been a motion that first roll call reflect Representative Garrido. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Representative Labang.
Mr. Speaker, I move to place Resolution 28-32 to the second reading file.
There's been a motion to place resolution number 28-32 onto our second reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. You may continue, Mr. Labang.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, Resolution 28-32 establishes a procedure that will be utilized by our body for the usage of the appropriated fund to our body through Public Law 35-36. The appropriated $15,000 to our body is intended for our operation with the trust bestowed upon us by the 35th Guam Legislature. the Governor of Guam, and the people of Guam. We, the Guam Youth Congress, must be responsible, accountable of our action, and be transparent when using our operation fund. The $15,000 came from the taxpayers' money to serve the youth of Guam and not for our own benefit. This resolution set up procedures that will be followed for the usage of our operation fund. Just for the purpose of emphasizing this resolution, the new Rule 30 will make any action for the usage of the Guam Youth Congress Operation Fund shall be introduced through a resolution form and shall be referred to the Committee on General Government Operation, who shall hear the resolution, which will be forwarded to the Committee on Rules of the Guam Youth Congress, who shall act on any appropriation that may be less than 500 and which shall pass with 2/3 vote of members present. All appropriation that is equal or greater than 500 shall be moved to the session floor and shall be voted by the Youth Congress as a body. All appropriation that has greater or equal to $500 shall include quotation. Mr. Speaker, at this point, I make a motion to amend and to add additional language on page 2, line 26. After the word quotation, the provision shall be added that shall be appended to the resolution.
Would you like to speak on the amendment, Representative LeBang?
Mr. Speaker, with this amendment, it will ensure that all copies of quotations will be available for all members to review before we vote on certain resolution. That is why I just want to propose that amendment, so the process will be transparent. It will not have any biases to any companies or that we may be allocating the fund to. So I just want transparency with that, Mr. Speaker, just to clear up the language.
On the amendment, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Tyron, you're recognized. Any other member who wishes to speak? Seeing as there are none, are there any objections? Seeing again that there are none, amendment passes.
Mr. Speaker, if I continue.
Yes, you may continue.
Just one more amendment to page 3, line 11, to add to Honorable Regine Bisco D, Chairperson of Committee on Rules of the 35th Guam Legislature.
Which line again, Representative LeBang?
Page 3, line 11.
Okay.
After the word legislature.
Okay. Are there any objections? Or any other member who wishes to speak? Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. Representative LeBang.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further amendments, but I am open to any representative who wishes to make this resolution more clear if they wishes to do so. But anyways, I hope that all of my wonderful colleagues support this resolution, and thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. On the main motion, any other member who wishes to speak? Representative Dahili, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank Representative Al for introducing this bill, because without the bill, we wouldn't have had any adjustments to know how we can appropriate funds, and with this procedure, it just gives us a better understanding. And with that, I'd like to yield, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Dahilic. Anyone else that would like to speak on the main motion? Speaker Valencia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, Madam Speaker. I'd like to commend the author of this resolution for establishing a procedure for our funds. But I'd just like to clarify for the body that there is no Guam Youth Congress Operation Fund necessarily. It's money under the Legislature Operations Fund, which is allotted for the Guam Youth Congress. So there is no existing Guam Youth Congress Operations Fund, right? So really, but that money is for us to use. We just send in invoices and provide the requests to the fiscal office of the Guam legislature, and they'd be happy to provide us the funds. And with that, also, there's a provision in the resolution. So I guess on that note, I'd like to strike Guam Youth Congress Operation Fund in the title and replace it with funds allotted for the Guam Youth Congress.
Okay. So the resolution will... Speaker Valencia, can you please reread the title for the
Sure.
current name?
So I'm amending it to read, relative to adding a new Rule 30 to the Ordina Reglamento Standing Rules of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress, which establishes the procedures for the appropriation of funds allotted for the Guam Youth Congress.
Thank you. Did all representatives get that? Okay, thank you. Anything else, Speaker Valencia? That is it? Back to the main motion. Anyone else like to speak on resolution?
Did they vote on the amendment, Madam Speaker? Sorry.
Thank you. Sorry. I would like to open the votes for anyone that would like to... Sorry, hold on. Do I hear an objection to the amendment? Okay, there. Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
I would like to thank the speaker for his wisdom for correcting me that there's no Guam Youth Congress Operation Fund. And I want to tell my colleagues that I stand as corrected. Thank you. And I do support this.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the amendment? Representative Flores, you're recognized. Yes, Speaker
I'd like to
Valencia.
make a motion for a recess, Madam
Okay,
Speaker.
thank you. We are in recess. Okay. Thank you. We are back from recess. Speaker Valencia?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On that note, I'd like to amend my amendment. So first, it's going to be two parts. First, I'm going to amend. Yeah, first I'm going to amend the title, or hoping to amend the title. So it's going to say, relative to adding a new Rule 30 to the standing rules of the 32nd Guam Youth Congress, which establishes procedures for expenditures of the Guam Youth Congress.
Okay. Can you please read the new, and that would be the new title, correct? Okay.
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Would anyone like to speak on that amendment? If not, let's take that amendment to a vote. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, amendment passes. Your next amendment, Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to make the amendment to strike all mentions of appropriations and replace it with expenditures. Yeah. So from the last result, from page 2. Okay, so we'll just go through all of them. Yeah, page 2, line 11, all the way through. All page 3, line 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the amendment would strike through all from page 2, line 11 to page 3, line 6. Am I correct?
Yes, all to strike all mentions of appropriations and replace it with expenditures.
Okay, thank you. And would anyone like to, do I hear any on that amendment? Would anyone like to speak on that amendment? Seeing. Okay, Representative Kennedy would like to speak on that amendment. He withdraws. Okay. Would anyone like to speak on that amendment? Representative LeBang, you're recognized.
I would just like to thank the speaker for making the technical correction, because I kind of not know that is expenditures. That I thought that they created a fund for the Guam Congress, and I stand corrected. And I would like to add Speaker Valencia as a co-sponsor of this bill, if anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative LeBang. So, okay, does anyone have an objection to the amendment? Seeing none, amendment passes. Thank you. Back to the main motion. Amendment. Back to the main amendment. Yes. Representative Speaker Valencia.
I'd also like to add to the amendment that any variations of the word appropriations be also replaced with variations of the word expenditures. Like in page 2, line 21, appropriated, it says appropriated, should also be replaced with expended.
Do I hear an objection to the amendment? Seeing none, amendment passes. Thank you. Next.
I have
Speaker
one
Valencia.
last amendment, Madam Speaker. It deals with page 2, lines 17 to 21. And specifically, the committee to which it will be referred to, the resolution. My understanding is the Committee on General Government Operations deals with expenditures or appropriations for the government. And any matters dealing with the Youth Congress, with the business of the Youth Congress, as stated in our rules, that's Rule 16, Section 16.02B, jurisdiction. The Committee on Rules shall have purview over, number 2, all resolutions relating to the business of the Youth Congress, which are acted upon without reference to any committee. So, this resolution regarding our expenditures should not be referred to the Committee on General Government Operations, but it should stay within the Committee on Rules, who will hear the bill, hold a committee meeting on the bill, and move the bill to the floor. So, on that note, I'd like to make an amendment to strike language in line 18, page 2. From the Committee on General Government Operations, semicolon, and the. So strike that whole thing.
Thank you. So right now we have an amendment for page 2, line 18 to strike government operations.
Yeah. Yeah, leave one the. So it's going to read, let's read it from line 17, section 30.02, all appropriations by the Youth Congress, all expenditures by the Guam Youth Congress shall be referred to the Committee on Rules, who will determine whether the resolution shall be placed on the session floor. Yada, yada. That's the amendment. Yes, you're right.
Thank
I'm
you.
Madam Speaker,
Do I hear an objection
I would like to make an amendment to the
to the
amendment first.
amendment?
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to withdraw that amendment, Madam Speaker.
So from what I understand, you're going to withdraw the page 2, line 18 amendment?
Yes.
And you're going to replace it with a different amendment that you're going to tell
Yeah.
us about?
Right now, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm proposing this amendment. It's going to say all resolutions pertaining to expenditures by the Guam Youth Congress shall be referred to the Committee on Rules. So it's going to add, after the word all, resolutions pertaining to and then to strike the Committee on General Government Operations, semicolon, and. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Valencia. Representative Kennedy would like to speak on the amendments.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As the chairman of the Committee of Taxation and General Government Operations, I feel that the Committee on Rules has purview of everything over the Youth Congress. I agree with that. However, I also believe that the Committee on Rules is also the same 5, 6, the leadership rung, and nothing ever gets disseminated out of the Committee of Rules. Therefore, the reason why I'm standing right now for the inclusion of the Committee of General Government Operations is because with these resolutions that pass through, these are allowed to be reviewed by members that are not just committee chairmen, not just the leadership of the Youth Congress, but rather ordinary members that are sitting in the committee. And I would like to reference the same rule that the speaker used earlier that says all expenditure or anything dealing with the Youth Congress must be moved to core. This resolution specifically says, specifically the exception to the same rule he was then referring to. It says things not referred to the Committee on Rules. This specifically refers appropriations and expenditures to general government operations just for review, not for, just specifically for review from people who are not in the Committee on Rules. Because the Committee on Rules has a strict set of who is the members and who is not. And this is all for amounts less than $500. I feel no need to adjust this. However, my overarching argument for this resolution is that it needs to be sent back to the Committee on Rules to be cleaned up. Too many amendments have been passed today. Too many changes have been done today, and this resolution doesn't look the same as when it was introduced. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Kennedy. Speaker Valencia, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The purpose of the resolutions going to the Committee on Rules, as provided by our rules, has nothing to do with excluding the opinions of other members. The Committee on Rules is free to get the advice and consent of the rest of the body. And it's the purview of the Committee on Rules to move the bill or to move the resolution onto the floor for the review of all members of the Guam Youth Congress. It's specifically cited in our rules that the Committee on Rules is the lawmaking committee of the body, and it has purview over the business of the Guam Youth Congress. There's nothing in that means exclude the opinion of other members. We are free to ask them for their opinion. All members are free to come to meetings of the Committee on Rules. I mean, I understand the concern, Madam Speaker. And we'd be happy to disseminate the information to all members. There's nothing going on here about the lack of transparency or anything like that. We'd be happy to provide the information to all members. The Committee on General Government Operations simply has purview over appropriations for the rest of the government, right? For the specific business of the Guam Youth Congress, it's the Committee on Rules that has purview over it. And I just want to reiterate that for the rest of the body, as it's stated in our rules. This rule has been in the books for many terms of the Guam Youth Congress, and it's the same process, it's the same protocol in the Guam legislature, right? It's also the body that elects the speaker, the vice speaker, the legislative secretary, and the chairman of the committees, right? And they're supposed to voice the concerns of the rest of their respective committees to the Committee on Rules. So there's really nothing here about having to exclude the opinion of other members, and I wholeheartedly am against that notion.
Thank you, Speaker Valencia.
And so I'd like to urge the body to approve this amendment so we can clear the language for this resolution and provide procedures for our expenditures so that we can actually go out there and use the money appropriately. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker Valencia. So before I call for the vote, I just wanted to kind of so clear up the air for some of the representatives. I know we have some new ones. Speaker Valencia is saying for this amendment to be with the Committee on Rules. Right. Representative Kaneni would like it to stay with the government, with the Committee on Government Operations. So outside of the Youth Congress, Senator Snogstein does have overview on everything. Committee on Rules does take care of the legislature. So we do not have a fund. We are under the legislature's budget. So we are appropriated that money. If we want to get anything, would have to be under the legislature. Does that kind of clear up any questions? I want to make sure everyone's kind of on the same page before we call for a vote. Okay. Representative Kaneni?
Madam Speaker, I motion for a 5-minute recess.
Okay. Guam Youth Congress is back in session. Speaker Valencia, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After speaking with our colleagues, I have decided to withdraw the amendment that I proposed
Okay.
and move to refer this resolution back to the Committee on Rules.
Thank you, Representative Kaneni. Okay, so as of right now, we have a motion to send it back to the Committee on Rules. Speaker Santos.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Yes.
I'd just like to say for the record that in light of the reference to transparency and accountability to Committee on Rules, as Committee on Rules Chairman, I'm hoping that none of the body sees that this as trying to prevent that, and we will be working on keeping accountability and transparency open while we work on this bill in the committee. But Madam Chair, I'm just pointing out to everybody that at least for Committee on Rules, if the body wants to send it back, then we can. But if not, then I think that discussing it here in session would prevent that transparency and accountability that people are assuming is reality, but is not the case. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Speaker Valencia.
Madam Speaker, I was just informed that this resolution was never referred to the Committee on Rules, so I would like to amend my motion, notwithstanding the House rules, that it be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion. We're gonna, by raise of hands? No. I'm sorry, are there any objections? Representative Kaneni, there is an objection. Okay, we are going to be voting now to refer Resolution 28-32 to the Committee on Rules.
May I make a motion for a minute recess?
We are in recess. Okay, hold on. We're just gonna real fast, okay? I know we're not on, but so this was introduced like I think the other day.
Just point of order, are we in recess, right?
Yes, we're in recess, but no one can hear me from down there. So this was not referred. It did not go through the process. It was just notwithstanding to include it today. So can anyone hear me? Chairperson, we're gonna refer this because it is a Committee on Rules resolution. It's gonna go to that core meeting. If you want to talk to your chairpersons, please do. If you want to come, you are all invited. Every core meeting is open to the whole body. Okay? We're good? Okay. So we're gonna vote to refer it. When we're done, we will vote if we want to send it back to committee. Are we good? Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Okay. The Guam Youth Congress is back in session, so we are going to take a vote to send back the resolution to the committee. Notwithstanding, House, we will be sending back the resolution to the Committee on Rules. Can I please get a raise of hands for who would like to send the resolution? Are there any objections? There is an objection. By vote of hands to send Resolution 28-32 back to Committee on Rules. Refer to the Committee on Rules. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Motion passes. It is back to the committee. Thank you. Okay, back to the main motion. Speaker Valencia, take the chair.
We've now exhausted all items in our second reading file and are now in our second roll call. Mr. Leader, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I move to reflect first roll call to second roll call.
There's been a motion that second roll call reflect first roll call. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes.
Mr. Speaker, I move to waive engrossment of bills and resolution in third reading file. Bills in the third reading file.
There's been a motion to waive engrossment for all bills in our third reading file. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, motion passes. We're now in the consideration of the daily file. On Bill 30-32, Mr. Secretary, roll call, or please read the title.
Bill number 30-32, as amended by the Committee on Land and Environment, introduced by Kyle DeHelig, Nolan Flores, Javen Santos, DeMarco Caneni, and Isabel Valencia. An act to amend Section 15104, Chapter 15, Title 2, Guam Code annotated relative to adding youth and student representation to the Guam Council on Climate Change Preparedness and Resiliency.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeHelig? Representative DeHelig, aye. Representative DeGracia? Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman? Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Asian? Representative Asian, aye. Representative Felicen? Representative Felicen, aye. Representative Flores? Representative Flores, aye. Representative Garrido? Representative Garrido, aye. Representative Labang? Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo? Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Pareda? Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Perez? Representative Perez, aye. Representative Kichichu? Representative Kichichu, aye. Representative Caneni? Representative Caneni, aye. Representative Quintanilla? Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Elijah Santos? Representative Elijah Santos, aye. Representative Javen Santos? Representative Javen Santos, aye. Representative Taga? Representative Taga, aye. Representative Tyron? Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Trinidad? Representative Trinidad, aye. Representative Christian Valencia? Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Isabel Valencia? Representative Isabel Valencia, aye. Representative Vicente? Representative Vicente, aye.
Bill number 30-32 received 22 ayes. There are 5 absences. Bill number 30-32 hereby passes. We're now on bill number 29-32. Please read the title, Mr. Secretary.
Bill number 29-32, as substituted by the Committee on Education and Youth Affairs and further amended on the floor, introduced by Representative Nolan Flores, Javen Santos, Prairie Garrido, Al Labang, Kyle DeHilig, Kyla Trinidad. An act to add a new chapter 54 to Title 17 Guam Code Annotated relative to creating a farm-to-table pilot program for the Guam Department of Education to be known as the Fangualuan Hasta Escuela Pilot Program.
Roll call, please.
Representative DeHilig. Representative DeHilig, aye. Representative DeGracia. Representative DeGracia, aye. Representative Dinsman. Representative Dinsman, aye. Representative Asihan. Representative Asihan, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, pass. Representative Flores. Representative Flores, aye. Representative Garrido. Representative Garrido, aye. Representative Labang. Representative Labang, aye. Representative Lorenzo. Representative Lorenzo, aye. Representative Pareda. Representative Pareda, aye. Representative Perez. Representative Perez, aye. Representative Kichichu. Representative Kichichu, aye. Representative Keneni. Representative Keneni, aye. Representative Quintanilla. Representative Quintanilla, aye. Representative Elijah Santos. Representative Elijah Santos, aye. Representative J. Van Santos. Representative J. Van Santos, aye. Representative Taga. Representative Taga, aye. Representative Tyron. Representative Tyron, aye. Representative Trinidad. Representative Trinidad, aye. Representative Christian Valencia. Representative Christian Valencia, aye. Representative Isabel Valencia. Representative Isabel Valencia, aye. Representative Vicente. Representative Vicente, aye. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, pass. Representative Felicen. Representative Felicen, no.
Bill number 29-32 received 21 ayes, 1 nay, and there are 5 absent. Bill number 29-32 hereby passes. Congratulations, Representative Flores, on your first bill. And on that note, we've exhausted all items in our third reading or on our voting file, and we'll move on to item 19, brief extension of remarks. Is there any member who wishes to be recognized? Representative Tyron, and then DeHilig, and then Kineni.
Sijos Maasi, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to thank each one of my colleagues for expressing their support and concerns with Resolution 28-32. I know when Representative Labang had asked me to co-sponsor this resolution, I was very much in support of it, but I believe that through my colleagues' works today, that it needs to be revised, heavily revised, and it needs to be more thorough. And I thank Representative Kineni for trying to call for a committee on a whole. And I think that that would have been, for me personally, that would have been the best way to show the people how we are going to go about revising this in a transparent and proper manner. But thank you everyone for expressing your concerns, and Sijos Maasi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Representative DeHilig, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to extend my greatest gratitude towards the body and for our bill sponsors for today, Bill 29 and Bill 30 reaffirms Youth Congress's commitment towards sustainability and creating a future with cleaner air, water, and soil. And I thank the body with harnessing their commitment towards this movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Daly. Representative Kennedy, you recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the body today for their deliberations on each piece of legislation that happened today, including the resolution. As a co-sponsor, I did want a process for the expenditure of Youth Congress funds, to be written in our standing rules. However, the process needs to be thoroughly laid out. It needs to be plain and clear, and it should not be, amendments that are written onto a paper and passed without a full view of how exactly we're going to spend this $15,000 that we got from the Guam legislature. I have actually a question both for the speaker and for the legislative secretary. Since we're almost 12, 13 months into our term, how far are we exactly with any of our 30 bills or any one of our bills that we've introduced and passed closer to the Guam legislature?
They will be sent to the Committee on Rules, or they will be referred to the Committee on Youth, chaired by Senator Amanda Shelton.
Okay, because according to Section 707 of our standing rules, everything is supposed to be authenticated and transmitted without delay to our oversight. And we've had sessions
I'm
since...
sorry, is this regarding any matter in the Youth Congress that we discussed today?
This is exactly the Youth Congress, Mr. Speaker.
No, was this a matter discussed today in our session?
I'll end my speech, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member for a brief extension of remarks? Representative Flores, you're recognized.
Sidious Masi, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to extend another heartfelt thank you to all members of the body as well as the co-sponsors of Resolution 28-32, Bill 29-32, and Bill 30-32. With Bill 29-32, it is great that we are directly benefiting the youth of our island, as is our mission and our duty to the youth of Guam. And with Bill 30-32, it is also absolutely crucial that we continue to voice the youth perspective in terms of issues, especially climate change, that will be the biggest threat of our generation. So again, Sidious Masi to everyone.
Thank you, Representative Flores. Any other member who wishes to speak for a brief extension of remarks? Seeing as there are none, moving to announcements. Any other announcements? Representative Tyron, you're recognized.
I'd just like to extend an invitation to each and every one of our colleagues to the next Democratic Caucus meeting, which will be at 4 p.m. next Saturday at the Hive in Tamuning. Right now we have a super majority in the Guam Youth Congress, and we look forward to attaining new members. So please come, all are welcome. And in addition to that, I'd like to extend an invitation to each and every one of you to come to my school's open house and showcase on February 5th at 6:30 p.m. in the gymnasium. Thank you very much. And then one more thing is that I am the founder of the SJS Mindanya Club, and we have recently established an Instagram page. So please feel free to give it a follow. We are trying to pioneer cultural awareness within our school. So the username is @Mindanya Guam, and please see me for any information. Sidious Masi.
Thank you, Representative Tyron. Any other announcements? Representative Flores, you're recognized. And then Representative Santos.
Sidious Masi, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Guam Public Library System and its Board of Directors, I'd like to invite you all to make use of the Barragata Archival Center, which opened in December of last year. So the Archive Center is open from Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. It houses newspapers from as far as 19 Forgotten, and also it has topics or things sorted by topics. I actually did some research there earlier in the week, and it was very helpful. Yes, and then the library also has extended hours for Saturday, the library here in Hagåtña, and that is 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So the library, again, is now open on Saturday. I invite you all to get your library card and make use of the library.
Thank you, Representative Flores. I'd just like to point out to the body that Representative Flores was recently confirmed as a member of the Board of Directors of the Guam Public Library System. So we have a youth member in the board. Congratulations. Representative Santos and then Representative De Hilig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd just like to say, in accordance with our standing rules on community service, that several of the representatives and I are volunteering at the Guam Animals in Need Bingo Night tonight. If anyone of the members would like to participate, show up at the Dedido Senior Center at 4 to help with setup. And if you would like to participate in the bingo night itself, doors open at 6 p.m. So at the door, entry is $20, and if you would like to come support Guam Animals in Need, please come. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative De Hilig, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to announce that Talada Micronesia is presenting the Guam Environmental Justice Forum later today at 12 through 2 p.m. at Siesta Cafe. And topics of discussion will be a panel of experts who will discuss about the truth of environmental issues on Guam related to recycling, water quality, and risks of bottled water. So I invite the body and the rest of the public to attend the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative De Hilig. And Representative Lorenzo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we just wanted to give everyone a heads up that March is Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. They will be having, along with various activities taking place throughout the month, such from wonderful organizations such as Guam Cedars, Special Olympics, the Guam DD Council is spearheading events, as well as including a proclamation signing, a resolution presentation, and a community outreach fair at Micronesian Mall. So last year, Guam Youth Congress, there was like a big conjunction. It was a proclamation, a legislative resolution presentation, and then a GYC presentation. So hopefully we could kind of coordinate that for this year as well. The GDDC is also coordinating an awareness wave with individuals with developmental disabilities and their families on March 2nd, and they want to see if anyone would like to assist in that. They're also looking for volunteers to join the wave, and also we can make signs. And so March 2nd is a government holiday, and the wave is scheduled from 5 to 6 p.m. The location is at the ITC intersection, so hope to see everyone there. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Lorenzo. Any other announcements? Representative Labang, you're recognized.
Before I make the motion to adjourn, I just want to announce. You have an announcement? Okay. So I want to announce and invite everybody that AmeriCorps Outreach every first and last Saturday of the month, we go to Abman Farm and do volunteer work. So if you guys are interested in doing a volunteer work, you guys can join us because we need volunteers as well. And last Monday was MLK Wave. We had some outreach as well. So, but other AmeriCorps programs have their own volunteer service activities. So just follow other AmeriCorps programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Labang. Any other member with announcements? Representative Isian, you're recognized.
Hello, I would like to announce and invite everyone that Class of 2020 for Okudu is having a Sing Guahan Season 2 competition today at 6 to 9 p.m. Yesterday, me and Chriselle attended the event, and it was really amazing, and I think you guys should come because it's really, really competitive and interesting. So it's $10 at the doors, and there will be refreshments and food. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Isian, Biba Bulldogs. Oh, I think there's a motion for a sample. No? Okay. Any other member with announcements? If none, I have one. Again, I'd like to remind the members of the Youth Congress that the Office of Senator Amanda Shelton is inviting all of you to apply to their Youth Congress Page program. It's an opportunity to work under a legislative office and learn the ins and outs of the legislative branch of government. The internship will run for 3 months. It's $10 per hour for 10 hours a week. So please submit your resumes and your cover letters to Senator Shelton's office via email at Office of Senator Shelton at guamlegislature.org by January 31st, 2020. Please. Please. Any other? No more? Representative Tyron, you're recognized.
I just wanted to remind everyone that I am selling Atlas cards for Harvest Christian Academy Future Business Leaders of America. All of the proceeds go to Harvest House, which is an organization dedicated to serving foster families on Guam, making it more convenient for them to have, or to purchase, not to purchase, but to attain necessary supplies when they take in foster children. So just to clarify, the cards are $15 and they work all year round, unlimited usage. So please support the cause, and if you are interested, please PM me. Si Diyos makasi.
I'm sorry, there are no sales allowed in the session hall. I'm kidding. Seeing as there are no more announcements, Mr. Floor Leader, do I hear a motion?
Mr. Speaker, I move that we adjourn today's session subject to the call of the Speaker.
There's been a motion to adjourn today's session subject to the call of the Speaker. Are there any objections? Seeing as there are none, we are adjourned.